Thank you so much again for stopping by my channel, 521 Investments. And on the last video, I was speaking on credit cards and wealth building. First, I want to say I'm not telling you to go out and get a credit card if you don't have one, especially if you cannot manage a credit card. And when I got my first credit card, I think it was maybe $500, 1,000. I can't exactly remember the number, but I know one thing, I could not manage it. Now, if you're using a debit card, use the debit card. If you're writing checks, write checks. But technology is constantly advancing, especially in finance. Normally, when you go to restaurants or retail stores, they want you to either use a debit card or a credit card. And you can, in some places, write checks. But when you're in line and someone's writing a check, I know the thought go through my mind, they're holding up the line. Look at these people, they're still writing checks. It's legal to write a check, especially if you have the funds to cover it. But the point that I'm making here is always keep an open mind and not closed to technology. You can't always be fearful of technology. I honestly rather use a debit card or a credit card to write checks. I personally don't like writing checks because technology is constantly advancing. Now, I have a debit card and I use that card for most of my transactions. And I will use my credit card for most of my major transactions. But as I began to use a credit card as a tool, other words, I had to learn how the credit card worked. And that came, me personally, from reading. I would read books or I would go online and read a PDF on credit cards. And as I gained knowledge, I began to understand how to use that tool. And the first improvement that I personally saw in my life was my FICO score. My FICO score, which is used to determine my interest rate on loans and credit cards. That's the first improvement I saw when I began to understand and use that tool, the credit card. It was a tool. It wasn't just something for using expenses. I used it as a tool. When I gained that knowledge and understanding, I saw it as a tool now. And that's the way I see my credit card now. Because as of 2023, most of my transactions go on my credit card. I say that again. I use it for almost all of my transactions now, all of them. Now, I saw the improvement in my loans and my credit cards. I had at one time a low FICO score, and I think it was between 450 to 500 because I had a car repossessed. And that went on my credit report, I believe, for 10 years. But I can honestly say, as of this year, 2023, my score is over 800. And I'm so happy. My score is over 800. Now that score fluctuates up and down as I use my card or my debt to income ratio, or DTI. Now, my DTI, my debt to income ratio, is my monthly expense divided by my monthly income, or whatever debt that I have for that month is divided by my income coming in. And that's what the creditors use to lend you and I money. And that determines your monthly payments and how you can repay that money that's being borrowed. The lower your debt to income ratio is, That's your balance between your debt and your income. So you want a low debt to income ratio. Now, my current debt to income ratio is 15%, but at one time it was over 40%. And what that was telling me, when it was over 40%, I had too much debt and not enough income coming in. As I said before, you want a balance between your debt and your income. Now, when you have a lot of debt and not a lot of income coming in, you may find yourself being stressful. You might find yourself being very stressful, trying to figure out, what can I do to get out of all of this debt? But remember, you need knowledge, understanding on whatever you're dealing with, and then the application to apply what you're learning. It's not enough to read things and not act on what you're reading until you learn it and until you master it. Now, I remember as a kid, I would go on the playground when we had PE, and they had a seesaw. Now, normally it was two kids on that seesaw, one at one end and one at the other. If a kid was heavier than I was, guess what? I went up in the air. If I was heavier than that kid went up in the air. So, if you have a lot of debt, guess what? And you don't have the income to support it, you're going up in the air. And when you go up in the air, which that debt is taking you, it's going to be very stressful. It's going to be very stressful. That means you got too much debt. So, always look for balance. Always look to even things out. It don't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter who's doing what or what's going on in other people's lives. Always look for balance. Keep your life balanced. Try not to be out of balance. The more you and I are out of balance, the more stress. Now, back to that seesaw. It was difficult to bring balance, but it was not impossible if we weighed the same. If we were both evenly weighted, if we weighed the same, we could have balance. Now, my current debt to income ratio is around 15%, as I mentioned before, which is very good and very low. But as I said, it was one time over 40%. In other words, I was over leveraged. I just had too much debt. There's a saying that the eyes are never satisfied. I say that again. There is a saying that the eyes are never satisfied. You know how it is? And I know how it is too. To go in a store, especially if it's dealing with technology, and I like new TVs. I like them. I like going in the stores and looking at the TVs, and man, and you remember how they were years ago? They were box, and now they're flat screens, and they're 65-inch and 70 and 80 inches. I'm not saying you shouldn't get one, but all I'm saying is the eyes are never satisfied. Other words, I can see other folks buying stuff, and it might not be my time or my season to get that big TV that I always wanted. that 75 or 80 inch. It might not be and even though it may be on sale. Other words, I may want to get it and just wait till the right opportunity to get it. So, please remember that. Just because you and I can walk into a store and we just see things that we want all the time, but going back to that seesaw, if that's going to be taking on too much debt and causes me to go up in the air and become stressful, I might not want that in my life at that moment. Other words, it might not be the right timing for that, because the key thing is finding balance. I read an article that in the USA, it's over $986 billion in credit card debt. And the average per person that have cars is $3,000 per person. Now, you know, and I know that every person doesn't have $3,000 on a credit card. Some have more, some have less. Some have more debt on the credit card, and some have less. I sleep better at night when I have less debt on my credit card, because I know how to manage that card now. I sleep better when I have less debt on that credit card. I sleep better. But the credit card company, they want you to max it out. As long as you make the minimum payment, that's what the credit card company wants you and I to do, to keep it maxed out. To keep it so your eyes and my eyes are never satisfied. And the only thing I need to do is pull out that card. Now, make it your mission to eliminate as much as bad debt as possible. And guess what? That's probably not going to happen overnight unless you win the lottery. You may win the lottery. If you play it, you may win. But bad debt is not going to go away fast unless you have a lot of income coming in to eliminate that debt. That bad debt is going to take some time. And you can eliminate it because it's not impossible. Matter of fact, all things are possible if you will believe. And what you believe is possible, you will act upon it. And then you can look back over the year or two or months and say, wow, I had this much debt, but I'm almost debt free. But remember, all debt is not bad debt. Most bad debt is consumer debt. The eyes are never satisfied debt. That's your consumer debt. The eyes are never satisfied debt. That's your consumer debt. Think about that. The eyes are never satisfied. That's the majority of our consumer debt. It's what we see. Not so much what we hear, it's what we see. So, if I can do it, you can do it. And if you can do it, I can do it. Please subscribe and share the video and like it. Until we meet again, peace.